Do you think that the defense did a good job getting some reasonable doubt in there? Maybe Vashti was depressed. Maybe she did commit suicide.
Unfortunately, no, and it's not really the defense attorney's fault. He had a terrible case to work with. I thought that their one saving grace, hopefully, was to put him on the stand. Hopefully he was believable, sympathetic, sad, contrite. He was none of those things. He was pompous, he was arrogant, he was controlling. I think his testimony combined with the piles of evidence against him sunk him and sunk him bad.
And now we have a B-65 being questioned. I believe we're looking at live pictures, and there is George Zimmerman. Let's bring in Philip Snyder, our attorney. Hey, Philip, as you listen to this, you know, and we know it's going to be a slow process. You know, you've got to get the fairest people out there. What questions are you really listening for? You're a lawyer. What questions would you ask a prospective juror?
Well, here's the thing, and it's funny that they talk so much about priming, you know, how it's a negative connotation. Guess what? The state and the defense, that's exactly what they're doing. Before they ask any questions, they're looking at their race, their religion, their height, their weight, what type of shoes they wear, what pen they have, what watch they have. They are priming the jury up and down. The questions are just to reinforce their thoughts and their stereotypes about which juror will sympathize with Trayvon Martin or which juror will sympathize with George Zimmerman.
How much do you have to be on your game right now as an attorney, Philip?
Oh, my God. This is the most crucial part of this trial. And it's amazing. As a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, you gain an inner understanding of a relationship between the juror. And they're looking at you, and you're looking at them, and you try to build a connection. So the most important thing that they can do on both sides is make sure the juries like you and they like your client.
Yes, because she started with, you know, the common sense thing. Vashti wasn't depressed. Nobody says that but Seacat and his brother, that she was excited and looking forward to a new life. Is that more important, or is it laying out a timeline, or both?
Well, I find the most important, and first I'd like to say I thought she was excellent. I thought she was very methodical, professional, diligent, and the jury seemed to like her. My approach would have been a little bit different, although not correct, but a little bit different. I would have focused more on the physical evidence. You have a gun, a .44 Magnum that's shot at an angle that would have made it almost impossible for Vashti to be the one that shoot that gun. You also had no soot in her lungs. You had no burns on Brett. I would have focused more on the technical side, but that takes nothing away from the prosecutor, who did an excellent closing argument and really resonated with the jury.
Philip Snyder's with us, our attorney. All right, Philip, as you listen to what Vinny laid out there, do you agree with that? As we, you know, look ahead, that this is more about rejection, this is more about, you know, as a lawyer thinking, ooh, that person, that's not going to be good if they're on the jury.
Absolutely. That's why Vinny gets paid the big bucks. Here's what it is, and it's a misnomer. Clearly, if a guy walked in, he's wearing an NRA hat, he's saying, I'm a former cop, and I'm the neighborhood watch captain of my community, and, oh, by the way, all my children are named George. Clearly, that's going to be someone that George Zimmerman wants. But guess what? The prosecution's not going to want that. So that person is going to be struck. So imagine it like a bell curve. You get rid of all the people on the left that the state doesn't want. You get all the people on the right that the defense doesn't want. And you end up somewhere in the middle. And that's where they get the phrase fair and impartial.
Got it. Okay. Again, trying to get down to 6 and a couple of alternates. We're watching that process unfold. Also, the B-65 that Gene just talked about there. She lives there but has not heard much about it. What questions do you ask just to make sure that's the case?
Well, I mean, she reminded me of that scene from Star Wars where Han Solo's frozen and then they release him back into the world. I mean, how do you live in the city and not know anything about this case? That's just amazing to me. But you just keep asking questions. You just try to find different ways to maybe trip her up, to see if she's really telling the truth, that she doesn't have an ulterior motive. And who knows, maybe she's one of the million people that knows nothing about this case.
Well, Philip, the backdrop of that is, if a pastor is talking about this case and potentially talking about justice for Trayvon Martin and his family, that's some pretty powerful stuff that a prospective jury would hear.
Absolutely. And here's what's interesting. Don West is in a difficult spot because he's asking questions and he doesn't want to alienate this juror because, again, we talked about earlier about the Batson challenge and also the Slappy and Neal. They're all in the same class. You can't just exclude someone simply because they're African American. So if he wants her off that jury, has to find a race-neutral reason, but he doesn't want to pry too much because if he doesn't get that, that might be the one juror that sways the jury.
Is hearing about it in church a reason?
Absolutely. This case has gotten a lot of attention through the churches, and I think that's a very valid point, and it's an avenue the defense has to go down.
Got it. Okay. Philip Snyder's with us, our attorney. Philip, less than 6 hours. Is that bad news for Brett Seacat? What are your thoughts?
Pack a bag, Brett. We're not seeing you again. He's not coming out of there. It's going to be a guilty verdict.
There you go. What was the, and you and I have talked about this, but let's reiterate for our viewer. What was his best bet, best theme to get some kind of reasonable doubt in there for this jury?
The best theme, the problem is that he's not a good witness. The best theme would have been for him to go on the stand and come off as sad, sympathetic, contrite, just angry and emotional, and that's not how he came off. He came off as aggressive. He told very flat jokes. He seemed technical. He seemed like the exact cop that would pull you over for a speeding ticket that you didn't like. Wow. So his testimony, along with the other evidence, sunk him.
Yeah, and to that point, you and I discussed it here right before he took the stand, what he has to do. And then basically he's going out there doing material, especially his first day on the stand. He's trying to, you know, as you mentioned, jokes. He tried
controlling the jury.
Yeah.
No, he tried controlling the jury. That was his way of somehow making them like him, and they didn't like him. They were very intrigued and riveted from the first 45 minutes. And then at the end, they started to go back in their seats. They weren't paying attention. He was a horrendous witness, and the state did a very good job cross-examining him.
Yeah, you know, and we could not see his face as he testified at his request. But Ted Rowlands, our colleague, was in there, and he made mention of, you know, Brett Seacat, you know, as someone who gets nervous, begins to laugh kind of awkwardly. That's not good for the jury as well. Verdict reached in the Brett Seacat murder trial. Back with Philip and more in a moment. And let's get Philip Snyder's comments as well. We lost Philip. Okay, and Philip said it all along, by the way, one of our attorneys, that the evidence was had mounted against Brett Seacat. And when he took the stand, he was not a good witness. He tried to crack jokes and do material as he's facing a murder one charge. Well, now we know the jury in Kansas has spoken. Brett Seacat, guilty, murder one.